Hey everyone, Cell here. In this video I'll be discussing Eldritch altars for the Searing Exarch and the Eater of Worlds. Both have their strengths and their weaknesses, so let's talk about what each side is good for and when you should use one over the other. Let's start with the Searing Exarch. Exarch altars are generally much better in the early game because they offer a significant amount of good mapping supplies as rewards from minion altars. Heading over to PoEDB real quick, and I'll link this down in the description if you want to get a look for yourself. Sorting by weight here from highest to lowest, with higher weight being a more common outcome, let's take a look at what the minion altars have on offer. So let minions gain, and we're going to look at Searing Exarch altars. You can see that the most common altar outcome is Lesser Eldritch Embers at about 54,000. A little further down, we have Chaos Orbs, is the second most common outcome at 48,000, so pretty close to each other, I would say. A little bit further, Divination cards, not that useful. A couple more Divination cards. Then we have Cartographer's Chisels at 23,000, a little under half of what Chaos Orbs are. Then Greater Embers, Grand Embers, if we go a little further down here, that was actually the Eater altar for Grand Ikers. But sticking to Exarch altars, we also have Orbs of Binding, which is a functionally an alchemy, but better. Fall Orbs, Instilling Orbs, Unmaking, and a little further down here we have Horizon, Enkindling, and Regret, and you can see we're still at about 8,000 here. So this would be about 1 in 6 Chaos altars you would see a Regret, Enkindling, and Horizons. One of each of those on average. So as you can see, it's mostly general mapping currency, remembering that Regrets can also be exchanged for Unmakings at 2-1 from Kirak. And a little further down here, you can see the remaining minion altars are comprised of a bunch of Scarab Awards. These are pretty low weighting individually, but collectively they are totaling up to a decent percentage of the pool. And the player altar side of things, the Searing Exarch doesn't offer as good of player altars as the Eater of Worlds, which we'll see later, and the boss altars are generally bad for both influence types. If you're after better rewards, it is worth killing the map boss as soon as possible to eliminate the possibility of getting boss altars, and that goes for whether you want the player altars or the minion altars. It's also good to keep in mind that these percentages don't scale in any way. If you have a 2% chance to drop a Chaos Orb, that's always going to be a 2% chance from an Eldritch minion. Quantity and rarity bonuses don't affect that whatsoever. Heading back in-game, we can take a look at the Atlas passives available. Both Exarch and Eater have several things in common. First up, they both have up to 40% Eldritch minion pack size between the two clusters that they have. So on the Exarch side, you can see over by the Keystone, 4 nodes at 5% each. And on the upper side, between these two notables, 4 nodes at 5% each. They also both have a notable near their Keystone that gives a 10% chance to duplicate their respective Eldritch currency, Eldritch Embers in this case for the Exarch. And they both have a notable that grants a 10% chance to double progress towards boss invitations. So if you were on 20 and this activated, you would go from 20 to 22 instead of 20 to 21. Lastly, they both have nodes that give Eldritch minions a chance to drop an item with an Eldritch modifier, 0.2% for each node here, total of 5 nodes. And this is really bad. These are generally useless nodes, and I would recommend hiding these items from your filter. Adding Eldritch modifiers to your items is generally one of the last things you want to do, and not the first. It's a lot easier to get good Eldritch implicits on a good item than it is to start with good Eldritch implicits and then make the item usable. So avoid taking more of these nodes than you absolutely have to, preferring to bridge between the top nodes here for pack size if you do want both of these notables, rather than taking the shorter path here up to whichever other notable you're missing. So only 2 points remain here, one of which is the last notable for the Searing Exarch, called the Light of Dawn. It gives a 50% chance to spawn a Searing Exarch altar when the influence of the Searing Exarch first appears, which is after you kill enough enemies that the first Eldritch pack spawns. So this is essentially very good for Exarch, because this is essentially an extra altar every other map on average, but it happens at the best possible time to get an altar, especially minion altars, which, as we've already covered, is exactly what Exarch is good for. It's worth noting that you can, of course, still spawn an altar from the first pack, so it's not extremely uncommon to get one altar from the initial spawning, and then another second altar after you finish off the pack itself. The last point here is the Keystone. Wrath of the Cosmos gives altars a 50% chance to have an additional upside, and any altar that has an additional upside will also have double the effect of the downsides. So, half the time you're getting one reward with one downside at normal effect, or two different rewards and one downside at double effect. Emphasis on the different rewards. This will never roll the exact same reward more than once. You can get the same, say, minion reward, or I think any reward really. You can get any upside any number of times, so you could get a Chaos Minion altar from your first one and then another one from your third altar, let's say. But you can never get more than one of each of the downsides. So something to keep in mind, and that applies to both Exarch and Eater. So between this Keystone, the Light of Dawn, and the weight of the mods themselves, the strength behind the Searing Exarch altars is consistency. Once you get a feel for the rewards, you'll have a very good idea of what you'll be getting from each map, generally speaking. If you're running an Alch and Go type strategy with Exarch altars early in the league, it's not uncommon to get showered with embers and other useful bubblegum currency, like we covered earlier, after a couple of good altars. I would get used to whatever your mid-tier currency sound is, and that just absolutely popping off at the end of the map sometimes. Now let's talk about Eater altars. Back in PoEDB here, can switch screen. We can see that the further you get past league start, the more likely you are to want to switch away from Exarch to Eater. And the reason for that is Exarch altars offer a lot of flat rewards. You get a percentage chance to drop items from the minion altars that don't need any map, quantity, or rarity scaling to be good, whereas the Eater of Worlds is more about player altars that scale up the rewards of the content you're doing. Not just the minions themselves, but other league mechanics as well, by offering drop duplication and increasing the map's quantity and rarity. Looking at the altar weighting once again here, we can see that the two most common player altars are for quantity and rarity of items found. It's worth pointing out that the wording both here and in-game can be a bit confusing. It says the player gains these stats, but these stats are applied to the area itself. In other words, it's the same as having increased quantity or rarity on your map. Scrolling down a bit further here, we can see that the altars offer a chance to drop or duplicate dropped basic currency, unique items, scarabs, maps, and divination cards. And looking at the weighting here once again, we can see that the weighting on quantity and rarity, about 165,000. The duplication altars, 33,000. So again, roughly 1 in 5 of the quantity or rarity altars, you're going to see a duplication altar. And remember that these are the base values, and for the Eater of Worlds, that means if you're using the keystone, these will have 50% higher effect. If we take a look at, say, the quantity and rarity alters for the Searing Exarch, we can see that the values are the same, 10 to 20 quantity, 15 to 30 rarity, same for the Searing Exarch rather, except the weighting is only 75,000, which is less than half of the Eater of Worlds weighting. So once again, just to draw the division even more clearly, the Searing Exarch is more about minion altars offering flat rewards that don't scale with the content you're doing or the map loot bonuses, whereas the Eater of Worlds offers bonuses that are explicitly very good for that, which again is why you want to eventually transition into using the Eater of Worlds altars later down the line. So I drew an example between the quantity and rarity altars, and if we look at the minion altars, as we saw earlier, good chance to get decent currency from the Exarch minions, whereas the Eater of Worlds minions offer alterations, chromatics, jewelers, fusings, etc., on top of the Eldritch currency, of course, which of course, none of these things are quite as good as getting chaos, chisels, unmakings, and things like that. So, especially early on in the league, you'll want to focus more on Exarch altars, building that stash of supplies for later, better maps. Back in the Atlas passive tree, as mentioned before, the Eater of Worlds has Atlas passives for pack size, 4 here, 4 down here, the Eldritch item drop chance, which again is kind of useless, the chance for double map progress here, another notable with chance to duplicate Eldritch Ikers, and this time instead of a flat 50% chance to spawn an altar at the beginning of the map, you have a 20% increased chance to find altars overall after killing a pack, and the keystone is essentially the inverse of the Exarchs. With it, you'll always have 2 downsides and 1 upside, but the upside is 50% stronger. Outside of some very early league scenarios where your character might not be able to handle stronger altar downsides, you generally want to use the respective keystone for either Exarch or Eater all the time. As for the positioning on the Atlas tree, Exarch is on the left, Eater is on the right. In my opinion, that's only really relevant early league, as once you have enough points, it generally isn't all that expensive to use either the Eldritch Gateway in the corner over here, or you'll have situations like I'm in now, where I want all of the map modifier effect that I can get regardless of which I'm using. So I'm running across the top here and all the way down to the other side, which puts me in equally good position to do either Exarch or Eater, spending the exact same amount of points regardless of which I want to spec into. The last thing to cover here is the bosses themselves. If you're wanting drops specific to a given boss, you'll of course want to use that boss's influence for every map, and prioritize clearing the maps quickly. If you have a lot of maps to burn, the progress towards a boss invitation doesn't require you to clear a significant amount of the map. You can just go in, kill enough enemies to trigger the first pack to spawn, and then leave. If you're clearing the map anyways, try to spend your remaining points on mechanics that are quick to finish, and don't scale well or at all with map quantity and rarity. For example, Essence and Betrayal would be 2 of my first picks. On the 28th and optionally the 14th map, killing the boss will drop a boss or mini-boss invitation respectively. Instead of going over each drop individually, I'll leave links down below to the wiki page for each boss and mini-boss, which should hopefully have up-to-date data on drops and drop rates from the bosses, regardless of whatever league it is. The only specific comment I have on boss drops is that in solo self-found, never count on getting a pair of Forbidden Flame and Flesh Jewels. They're fairly uncommon to begin with, and it is exceedingly rare that you'll ever get a matching pair from the two bosses. So I would never specifically grind that out. If you happen to get a pair, then more power to you to try to use it, of course, but I just wouldn't ever go through the suffering of trying to grind it out. It's also worth noting that, say you're on your 28th map and you forget to kill the boss for your invitation and you've already moved on to the next map. You will not lose your boss invitation and you won't have to do another 28 maps to get another one. If you're at 28 and you don't kill the boss, you'll simply stay at 28 out of 28 maps. So whenever you get around to killing the boss, it'll drop the invitation and reset you back to 0, but it'll never reset you back to 0 automatically. Switching back to PoEDB one last time here, I thought it might be worth pointing out that you can in fact go and take a look at all of the downsides if you don't already have a good idea of what the downsides might be and whether your build can handle them. Generally, the boss and Eldritch minion downsides you kind of just play by ear depending on the map, but for player downsides, keep in mind that, say you're doing Eater of Worlds altars, and you want to be able to take the downside that gives you minus cold and lightning res, well, here you can see it peaks out at minus 60 to minus 40, so you can overcap your cold and lightning res in order to be able to take these altars without any downside whatsoever. Or likewise, you can see, okay, we're getting chill and shock things happening here. Am I chill and shock immune? If so, then you're good to take these without a second thought. So if you're curious, poke around, see what these are kind of up to and whether or not your build can either handle them without issue or can do something in order to handle them. And other than that, that's about it for this video. I hope it was educational or at least entertaining in some way. If there's something I could do better, don't hesitate to let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.